In today's program, we take a look at the complex historical relationship between race and organized labor in the United States, with a special focus on the important role that African Americans had.
In February 1968, in Memphis, Tennessee, some 1,300 sanitation workers, members of Local 1733 of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal
Hello. Testing, testing. Hi. Am I doing this right? Huh? Okay. Or should I do this? They both work? Okay. So I am going to introduce to you the congressman for the 5th Congressional District, Congressman Gregory Meeks.
I want to thank Rosalind Spigner, who is my district leader, and your Delta sisters. And it's always good when Red is around and Deltas are in the house. One of the things that we most look forward to in Washington, D.C., and there's not much to look forward to in Washington, D.C. right now, but when Red takes over the Hill, it makes a difference. And your presence there makes a difference because it sends a word and puts on notice all of the members of the United States Congress that you are advocating for the people. And as we celebrate on this cold Monday morning, Monday afternoon now, the life, the times, and the dream of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we know that it is more important than ever given what is going on in Washington with number 45. We're living in serious times and the camera of history continues to roll. As we speak, 800 million people are being held hostage. And that's exactly what it is. 800 million people plus are being held hostage. Over the weekend, I was over at Kennedy Airport talking to a number of those individuals who are trying to keep Americans safe, who are not getting paid a dime, the TPS workers. They're there trying to figure out how they're going to pay their rent, their bills, where their food's going to come from, yet they're back to work every day, and they're trying to figure out, oftentimes, how to pay for the gas to get them to and from work. And yet, the person who is now living in public housing at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue doesn't really care. And some, if you listen to his rhetoric, it is because he believes that most of the individuals who are out of work look like the people that are in this room, in this sanctuary. So it is more important now than ever that we stick together and that on this day, we think about those things that Dr. King fought for. And what's important, there's 3 quotes that I've been walking around with today that I've been keeping in my mind's eye of Dr. King. One is, time is always right to do what is right. And that gives me strength in the Democratic caucus and those of us there to fight 45. Let's do what's right, not what is easy. Let's do what's right. And we want y'all to stand with us as we do what's right and not allow an individual to hold people hostage and who continually lies. The Washington Post has already said over close to 5,000 times since his presidency, he's given huge lies. The second quote is, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. We need the American peoples to speak up and speak out. We can't afford to be quiet about what's taking place in our country. When you think about the issues of the day, whether it be immigration, whether it be health care, whether it be equal opportunity and equal pay, we can't afford as a nation to be quiet about it. And when I look and talk to some of my colleagues in government, particularly those who are Republicans, they whisper certain things to me, but they don't stand up and speak out in the manner that they should against the injustices that they see. And that's the third statement. He says, in the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. So if you have anybody that says that they're your friend, and this is what I tell my so-called Republican friends that I have, don't come to me and say you're my friend and not speak out. This is part of the deal that I had with Paul Ryan when he was the speaker. He just gave in to anything and everything that the president said. But I am reminded on this day, because sometimes, you know, once we've come from the 180-degree change that we had in the presidency, the 44th president of the United States, we were all proud because there was not one single incident in Barack Obama's administration. Not one person indicted, not one person that got in trouble, not one scandal at all in the entire 8 years that he was the president of the United States. And so sometimes I scratched my head and said, Lord, how could this guy become president of the United States? Oftentimes, you don't know. But the answer I get is when I look, because I leave with this, with the hope and the dreams of Dr. King, there's something still happening in this country as a result of it. I went into a barber shop. Young men between the age, I guess, 22 and 30. Generally, I go into the barber shop to get my hair cut, and they're talking sports, or they talk about girlfriends, or they're talking about something else. I went into this barber shop. They didn't realize who I was or what my job was, and they were talking about politics. They were talking about their children, and they wanted to make sure their children were protected. They were talking about what was taking place in Washington, D.C. And so I started to see how we are coming together like never before. And then we had the November elections. And in the November elections, there was a substantial change in Washington so that the people who were apologizing and protecting Trump, well, in the 116th Congress in the House of Representatives, those days are over. 55 members of the Congressional Black Caucus now, more than ever in the history of this country. 55 members of the Congressional Black Caucus. What does that mean? Because Dr. King was fighting to make sure that we had the right to vote for civil rights and voting rights. And so with that those 55 people, it means that 5 members of the Congressional Black Caucus will be chairing major committees, full committees in Washington, D.C. So the check on this president, just wait to Eddie Bernice Johnson from Houston, Texas, who will be chair of science and technology. Wait till she's up, because this president, they don't believe in science and the environment. Eddie Bernice will make a difference there. Benny Thompson from Mississippi will be chair, or is chair, of Homeland Security and everything that goes through it. Bobby Scott from Virginia is chair of Education and Labor. And when you think about all the things that will be oversight and watching and moving, and there's going to be some testimony starting February 3rd, watch Elijah Cummings from Baltimore, Maryland, chairing government and oversight. And finally, the connections between banks and this president and things that's going on. Maxine Waters will be, or is, the chair of the Financial Services Committee. Historic in nature. 32 members of the Congressional Black Caucus will be chairs of major subcommittees, including yours truly, because I'll be right there with Maxine Waters on the Financial Services Committee, chairing within my jurisdiction all of the financial institutions in America and monetary policy. And so we're going to be looking at these banks and how they relate to the people of Southeastern Queens and throughout America, and make sure that the kinds of policies that have caused the greatest recession since the Great Depression and caused us to lose so much wealth in our communities will never happen again, and we will hold them accountable. We also want to make sure those doors open, because as my sisters from Delta have individuals that you push forward and folks have gotten their opportunity to get an education, we need to make sure that the doors open in these financial institutions so that we have folks like you sitting on their board of directors, sitting in the C-suites, that if you're an attorney, if you're an accountant, if you're an engineer, if you're an architect, that those doors swing open so that young folks can get the jobs that's going to pay a whole lot of money and be at the table to make sure that the right thing happens. So as we celebrate Dr. King, and I see two of our great council members here, let us keep in mind the significance and the importance that we have. So, and supporting our, like Rory Lansman and my brother Donovan Richards, it is collectiveness and togetherness that we're going to make sure that the dream that Dr. King has had is turned into reality, because that's what we need to do now. Let's not just keep the dream. Oh, Mr. President's here. The dream must be a reality. So let's work together. Let's stay together. Let's make sure that this is not just one day of unity, but every day of unity. I just got to mention one other last thing, because I see Jacques here. I was with him last night, and just to show about making sure that our young people, he had a room full of young people who played for the Rosedale Jets. And his deep message was, it's not about football or just about football. Football was a means to an end to create doctors and lawyers and scientists and engineers and labor leaders and political folks. So I want to thank Jacques for his service to our community and our young people and making a difference there. I'll throw in this. I'm still his thunder. Donovan Richards came with a little, this is how being different and make a difference in city council, what you did. $3.2 million to build a new field for them to play football in. And that's representation. Thank you, Donovan. I'm going to close, because I've got, as Rosalind said, I'm running from spot to spot, but I just wanted to make sure that I got here on this cold but warm Monday afternoon to especially my sisters who are Deltas, but those of you who are here to celebrate. You have to mention this. Oh. What she has shown me here are my dear sisters who are part of the Congressional Black Caucus, who are dynamite and strong, who are also members of your great sorority, starting with your former national president, you know, and I call her effectively the boss lady, because she's a former chairperson of the Congressional Black Caucus. I'm going to call all their names. I got another sister, just looking at all the pictures, from Brooklyn, who's my sister. Then we have, well, let me just name them. Newly elected from Atlanta, Georgia, Dynamite took a scenario of gun violence with her son Lucy McBath. She is now a member of Delta, of course, but a member of the Congressional Black Caucus. Then we have former mayor from Detroit, Brenda Lawrence, and they are proud. My sister from Brooklyn, Yvette Clark, who wanted to come by here. Actually, I don't know whether she's going to get by here. When I saw her yesterday in Brooklyn, she was saying that she knew that something was going on out here, and so she wanted to get out here. Then we have former police chief from Orlando, Florida, with us, and just blanked on her name. Val Demings. Don't tell her I blanked on the name real that quick. Then from Ohio, Cincinnati, Ohio, Joyce Beatty, and last but least, your former chair, Marsha Fudge, who is the boss lady. They are dynamite, and each and every one of them, with the exception of Lucy, who just got elected, will be chairs of major subcommittees. So you all now have some real power in Washington, D.C. Thank you, Rosalind. May God continue to bless each and every one of you, and let us continue to make Dr. King's dream a reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, I'm going to bring up our council member, Rory Lansman. Councilman Lansman.
Thank you, Rosalind. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Councilman Rory Lansman. It's good to be here with all of you. It's good to be with the Deltas. It's good to be my colleagues, Congressman Meeks and Councilman Richards, and you're going to hear later from 3 dynamic presidents of important labor unions here in New York City. You know, as time passes on, our memories and remembrance of things past has a tendency to become more general and less specific. When we think about Dr. King and the work that he did and the victories that he achieved, we think of the I Have a Dream speech on the Mall. We think of the march at Selma. And for sure, those broad principles of justice, of freedom, of equality have endured and are never more important. One of the pictures that you'll see through this montage, a couple of them, in fact, I ended up tweeting out those pictures in the last couple of days because they remind me of what happened at the Lincoln Memorial just in the last week, in the last couple of days. You might have seen it. A Native American man who was there to celebrate his heritage, his identity, to assert his dignity and his equality, was accosted by a bunch of young, mostly white kids wearing Make America Great hats. Does everyone see that on social media or on TV? And I thought, it reminded me of something. And I thought, what does it remind me of? It reminded me of during the sit-ins where you'd have one or a few African-American young people sitting at a lunch counter just asserting their basic right to dignity and equality, not saying anything, not chanting anything, just being there and being surrounded by a group of angry, hostile white people. We all remember when we've seen images, during school desegregation of a young black teenager, young woman, walking to school, being surrounded and accosted by a group of angry, jeering, mean-spirited white teenagers, young people. So the general principles that we remember from Dr. King's work are as important today as they always were. Today's panel, though, about labor and the civil rights movement reminds us, though, that Dr. King didn't just speak in generalities. He certainly had that gift of a great speaker. but he was fighting for actual change and actual policies. He was a strong advocate of the labor movement, of the rights of working people, of unions. In fact, when he was assassinated, when he was murdered, it was at a time when he was involved with a strike in Memphis, Tennessee, related to sanitation workers. My own work in the council, I chair something called the Committee on the Justice System. I oversee the district attorneys and the courts, and with my partner, Donovan Richards, who oversees the police department, we oversee the criminal justice system here in New York. And of all the things that we have so much work still to do to realize the vision of Dr. King and the policies that he specifically fought against, our criminal justice system is probably in most need of urgent reform. Whether it's the fact that we over-police and mass incarcerate communities of color, something like 90% of the people who are getting arrested are summons for marijuana possession or fare evasion or Black and Latino. Look at the population sitting on Rikers Island because they can't make cash bail. Overwhelmingly people of color. Throughout the criminal justice system, the racism and inequality, which Dr. King talked about both in general terms and very, very specifically, still exists here in New York City. There are so many things that we still need to do, whether it's the rights of working people, housing, education, but the criminal justice system as well needs our urgent attention. So today, this is my third Martin Luther King event. I still got 2 more. I'm chasing the congressman around. I don't know if he's chasing me around or I'm chasing him around, and Donovan too. I feel a sense of renewed purpose and strength from all of us being together, talking about these issues, showing up, and committing ourselves to making the kind of reform that's necessary. Not just at the lofty 30,000-foot level general principles, but getting in the nitty-gritty of changing a system that at its core is still fundamentally racist and unequal. I hope today is a meaningful day for all of you. I want to thank the Deltas for putting this event together and giving me the opportunity to say a few words. And to all my friends in labor and my colleagues, it's good to see you as well. Thank you all very, very much.
Now I would like to bring up our councilman, Donovan Richards.
Let's give it up for Rosalind. She continues to bring our community together and make sure we're getting good information out and we're educating each other. It's an honor to be here. I am New York City Councilman Donovan Richards, and as Rory said, we're sort of like peanut butter and jelly almost. We're like stuck together almost just about because he chairs the Justice Committee, and I have the distinct honor of chairing the Public Safety Committee, which gives me oversight over the New York City Police Department and the City Council as well. And I just want to say, I talked about this a little earlier, is that we are living in a world right now, and I think, you know, when we look back to when Dr. King was here, you know, he spoke of many of the same issues that we're dealing with today. When you talk about social justice, economic justice, the criminal justice system and the inequities and the disparities around that. And it's very clear today that even right here in New York City, that there are 2 criminal justice systems that exist. There's one for white people, and there's one for people of color. And we got a long way to really we have a long way to go in really addressing the inequities. I think Rory touched on a few things, and we both co-chaired a hearing when we both took over our respective chairmanships just earlier, it's blurring, last year, and around January, February, on how in our communities, in the 105 precinct, right here in New York City, we led the city, a Black middle-class neighborhood, in marijuana summonses and arrests. 86% of all arrests in New York City were of young people and people of color right here. So when we talk about Jim Crow policing, when we talk about creating a permanent undercaste system, what we are doing is locking young people out of mainstream society. That means housing. That means once you get arrested for a low-level offense, something that white folks do too. Let me be clear, white folks smoke marijuana on average just as much as everyone else. The only difference is that when a black person smokes, we go to jail. When they smoke, they can still go to Yale. So we got a long way to go. And even as this conversation around the state is having on legalizing it now, Wall Street is already gearing up for it. There are firms moving into the city and the state right now. I sat on a panel at the New York Bar Association just last month. I was the only person of color in that room. And I sat on the panel as a leader in that conversation. But we have to make sure, not just on that, and I'm not here to promote smoke, and I'm not going to tell you that because I'm in church that I've never smoked. I may not have inhaled. That was my high school days, okay? But I just want to put out there that we can't allow the vultures, the very communities that have been hit the hardest, to now be on the outskirts as Wall Street comes in and collects billions of dollars. We need to make sure that our communities are at the forefront of the permitting process, that we're at the forefront of expunging records. There should be no conversation around legalization until we expunge the records of all these young folks who've been arrested and locked up for it. And Oakland is a good model to look to. Now, I know we're here to talk about labor, and on today, I penned an op-ed in the Daily News just today on the work that Dr. King was really arriving at a point where he was looking to address economic justice and injustice. And the night before, on the eve of his assassination, as Rory alluded to, he was in Memphis working with some brothers and sisters out there who worked in the sanitation industry, who were being paid low wages, who were working in unsafe conditions. And would you believe it, right here in New York City, the same exact thing is happening. There's an attack on labor happening across this city. And why should we be concerned about that as a community? We largely have always been the backbone of this city. The working middle class, black folks in Southeast Queens are overwhelmingly part of labor unions, which have enabled us to buy our homes. There's an attack on that right now. Why should we be concerned about that? No, we can't accept these industries, like some sanitation salvage, who I spoke about in the Daily News today, paying their workers like $9 an hour. Then a young brother, an immigrant, was actually working one night, falls off the truck, dies, and the company reports some crazy homeless guy ran in front of our truck, and he was killed when the gentleman was a member of their company. 21 years old, lost his life, and they tried to cover it up. Happy to say we snatched that license, I believe, last week. They cannot operate in New York City. But I say that to say, we have to watch. There's mission creep from the federal level. They are trying to gut unions. That has a big impact on our communities. Who's going to buy your home? Who is going to be able to afford to stay in this city without a good paying job, without benefits? Over at what? I think I saw 800,000, close to 1 million people here with no health care in New York City, in the richest place perhaps in the world, where so much capital is. Right here, there are 60,000 people sleeping in a homeless shelter today. So we have to create that upward mobility, and I'm happy to be here with my brothers in this fight. I see Sean, and sisters too, sorry. I was looking in that row. I'm not gonna call names because then I'll get in trouble, but we got, yeah. So first off, let me be clear. Nothing happens without the sisters. Let's be clear. Let's be clear on that. I don't care if they're the president of the union or not. See, they smile, right, Anthony? But where's Michelle? She really runs the union. So to our sisters and brothers, sisters first, and brothers in labor, we really appreciate what you do. They are out here fighting each and every day. When we are inside, comfortable, they are marching for you. Women's equity, women's fair pay. So much to do. So on this day, I'm honored to be here. May we renew our vigor, renew our energy. Get out there, legislate, march, yell, scream, vote. There's going to be a Queens District Attorney's race this June. I said it. The Queens District Attorney's office that we have right now is the most punitive office in the country, perhaps. They are still living in the Jim Crow South era. That's right, I said it. Bring it back to them. My record is clean. Ain't nothing they could do to me. We got to change that. We got to change that, and we're going to have an opportunity to do that. I see Rory is here. He's a candidate. We have an obligation to make sure that our young people can live in a city that is fair and equal. And under no conditions should we allow our young people to fall victim to this system without any fairness or equality. With that being said, I've spoken long enough, spoken much long. I'm really becoming a politician, Rosalind. You got to come get the mic. Before I would be short-winded. Now I'm long-winded. But thank you so much. Thank you for having this important forum. God bless you all.
You see, they're so good to us. That's why I let them get away with murder. But just to kind of move the program along, I know we have Lift Every Voice and Sing, welcome and introductions, but we're going to skip that and come back to that and put on the film. So the first film that you will be seeing is a film clip, I Am a Man, Dr. King and the Memphis Sanitation Strike. Following that will be a documentary called The Black Labor Movement. Thank you.
In February 1968, in Memphis, Tennessee, some 1,300 sanitation workers, members of Local 1733 of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, began a strike. This wasn't an ordinary strike. We forged together a coalition of the religious community, the civil rights community, and the labor movement. It was a struggle for freedom, for dignity, for decency, for equality.
Back in those days, we had to do this to live. The treatment that we were getting. Sometimes I just feel like tears are coming my eyes.
And we just got tired. We had meeting and discussed it and said, we're going to do something about it. Said there ain't but one thing to do, is just to make our move. And you know, a man has got to have a strong mind to go out in the street, leave his job, and go out in the street.
We felt like we would have to let the city know that because we were sanitation workers, we were human beings. The signs that we were carrying said that I am a man, then we was going to demand to have the same dignity and the same courtesy any other citizen of Memphis has.
We are saying that we are determined to be men. We are saying that we are God's children.
After a few days, we found that the strike was more than just a recognition and economic strike. It was a social struggle in this society. We talked, they didn't listen. Management and the establishment here wanted no relationship with unions whatsoever.
The mayor particularly got completely hung up on this one issue, that he was not going to recognize the existence of public unions.
When a public official orders a group of men to get back to work and then we'll talk, and treats them as though they are not men, that's a racist point of view. And no matter how you dress it up in terms of whether or not a union can organize, it's still racism. For at the heart of racism is the idea that a man is not a man.
We thought we had reached an understanding during a meeting of the Public Works Committee. The council will meet tomorrow. Committee Chairman Fred Davis gave us a promise
that the council recognize the union and that there'll be some form of dues checkoff for the union.
We were told to meet with the council. When we got there, one of the most crude charades in the many years I've represented working people took place.
When they told me there'd be an honest council meeting today, and you and I would have a chance to talk to this council, I regret I believed them. They lied to me and they lied to you.
We decided to march to the Claiborne Temple. And as soon as we got out there, some of the police officers, not all of them, began hassling some of our folks, and I remember intervening and promised them faithfully that these men did not believe in violence, that the union did not believe in violence. We started a march, and we moved down there, and police cars were used to harass us and push us around, and this was a turning point.
I don't know who it was. Somebody hollered and said, break it up. And they just broke right on us. And honest folk God in heaven, and they sprayed so much of that stuff down my collar until I could feel it look like running down my back.
My eyes, they shot that stuff in both my eyes. Couldn't see nothing.
We built into our planning the escalation principle in order to help momentum build. Mass meetings every night, daily marches of the workers and clergy, and then sit-ins at the City Hall, which resulted at least one time in major arrest of many of us. In the meantime, I had been talking with Dr. Martin Luther King about his support and about his coming in order to both identify the struggle with himself and to help the people in the community identify the struggle in terms of a nonviolent campaign.
You are demanding that this city will respect the dignity of labor. So often we overlook the worth and the significance of those who are not in professional jobs, of those who are not in the so-called big jobs. But let me say to you tonight that whenever you are engaged in work that serves humanity and is for the building of humanity, it has dignity and it has worth. You are reminding not only Memphis, but you are reminding the nation that it is a crime for people to live in this rich nation and receive starvation wages.
On March 28th, Dr. Martin Luther King led a march here in Memphis in support of the sanitation workers. This is one of the few times when his staff did not organize the march. Some of the young people saw this as an opportunity to demonstrate their frustration and what they considered the slowness with which the community leadership was moving. They began to break out windows and disrupt the march. This gave the policemen an opportunity to move in, to break up the march in an effort to discredit Dr. Martin Luther King and the local leadership.
When we came back downtown the following day, really to be confronted with tanks and half-tracks and jeeps and National Guardmen with bayonets all over the place, it really sort of provided the classic kind of confrontation between striking workers with nothing more than a picket sign and really what was the might of the armed forces of this city. And it was frightening in one aspect, and where the least bit of wrong action could really have triggered a situation that would have been tragic for many people.
Somewhere I read
of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest for rights.
At the time that I heard the news of Dr. King's death, we were still struggling to arrive at an acceptable compromise. So many times in issues of this type, a little bit more leadership, a little bit more wisdom, a little bit more vision, and a little bit more flexibility would enable you to deal with a problem. And yet, this time we were not, and we had to have the tragedy to bring us to our senses.
The City of Memphis recognizes the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFL-CIO, Local 1733, as a designated representative for certain employees in the Division of Public Works.
The day that strike was over, that was the best part of my life.
All in favor of the recommendation, let it be known by saying aye.
And I'm telling you the truth. You talking about a bouquet. It was black, white, they tied up on that stage, hugging and crying and hollering.
I win a whole lot in this strike because respect, that's the most important thing. They respect you as a man.
We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. I just want to do God's will, and He's allowed me to go up to the mountain, and I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land.
In today's program, we take a look at the complex historical relationship between race and organized labor in the United States, with a special focus on the important role that African Americans have and continue to play in the U.S. labor movement. I'm your host, Bill Fletcher, and that's today on this episode of The Global African. Over the past 2 decades, the organized labor movement in the United States has undergone many dramatic changes. The nature of the U.S. economy has evolved from one that was primarily an industrial base to one that is more service-oriented and high-tech driven. The numbers of unionized workers witnessed a steady decline as the employers, supported by right-wing politicians, fought with all their might to prevent the labor movement from organizing workers. For example, Walmart and McDonald's, the country's largest service employers, have fought successfully in blocking all efforts by the labor movement to organize their employees. But in spite of these anti-working class measures, the organized labor movement has been experiencing something of a revival in recent years. More and more service workers in the health, hospitality, fast food, and high-tech sectors are defying all of the intimidation tactics of their bosses and are voting to join the labor movement. And most of these new unionized workers are, in fact, people of color. Has organized labor been instrumental in its support for the ongoing black freedom struggle in the 21st century? And what is the fundamental character of the labor movement in the so-called post-racial Obama era? And we're joined with William Bill Lucy, the former Secretary-Treasurer of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, the founding president of the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, an organization founded in 1972 in the context of the presidential elections that took place. It's rare to have an opportunity to introduce someone who is not only an icon, but someone who had a personal impact on me. I first learned of Bill Lucy in reading a book, Organized Labor and the Black Worker by Philip Foner. It was in the mid-1970s.
Right.
And it was towards the end of the book, and he's describing the formation of the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists. And I was just floored. I said, wow, this is fabulous. This is something I need to get involved with. And eventually I did. So welcome to the program.
Well, my pleasure being here. Thanks for the invitation.
That's great. So you relatively recently stepped down from both positions.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to just go back. You have been active in the labor movement virtually all of your adult life.
Absolutely. I'm at 60 years, give or take a little bit, in that now.
And you were in Memphis in 1968.
Right.
Can you just say a little bit about how you got to Memphis?
Well, I was a staff employee of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees in 1968. I came on board in 1966 and was assigned to Detroit, Michigan, and got a call one day from the president's office that raised the question, what are you doing for the next day or so? Mm-hmm. And I had the wrong answer. I said I'm relatively free, so president at that time, a fellow by the name of Jerry Worth, asked if I would go down to Memphis and take a look at what appeared to be something going on. We didn't know what, or didn't even know why. So I went down to take a look. And in fact, what you had was the foundation of a confrontation being built by workers themselves who had just become incredibly frustrated with the process. This is Memphis, Tennessee, 1968.
And these are the sanitation workers.
These are sanitation workers who had been trying forever to form a union, to get somebody to speak for them in this complicated southern major city, as segregated in 68 as it was in 28. And they simply decided that they had to have some ability to find an advocate for them. And somewhere during their discussions, a rather catalytic event took place. Two men, sanitation men, mm-hmm. in the back of a truck, as they always did, to get out of the weather. Something tripped the mechanism. The truck crushed them into the packing system. And this became the trigger, essentially, for the strike. And the strike was really about the inability of these workers to get their issues on the table, to get somebody who would be willing to listen to them and take some action. But they were very clear that they had gone through these kinds of processes before. They wanted a clear opportunity to have a trade union speak for them. Mm-hmm. And this, as I say, caught the eye of the president. I went down, tried to get familiar with the history and try to add some view and assistance to their efforts to do this. It turned into a full-fledged strike mm-hmm. Of that department. Some 1,300 men were involved. And the incredible contradiction was, here's one of the most powerful cities in the South who still could not understand that they were an employer mm-hmm. And had the responsibility of dealing with a workforce in a modern era. These were men who worked every day, most of them, but still qualified for virtually every public assistance program that the city had. So it was an issue of the working poor. Mm-hmm. And they were determined that they were going to find a way to build themselves a union. And that program went on for 67 days. Unfortunately, ended with the assassination of Dr. King. Mm-hmm. But they were determined that the only way they were going to get any relief immediately and progress in the future was to have a union that they had voice and direction of to speak for them on their issues.
This actually raises a question that I've meant to ask you for a long time. AFSCME was successful in Memphis. There were other Southern organizing efforts. Why did AFSCME not do more in the South?
We had a number of campaigns, but in 1968, we were a relatively small union trying to figure out what made the most sense in terms of trying to organize public sector employees, black or white. Mm-hmm. we had a serious conversation with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and with Dr. King prior to his death about how we do this. And we certainly had no experience in it. Memphis was an incredible experience for us. The model had great possibilities, but we could never tell what we were going to confront. And we certainly did not want, after the assassination, to raise the specter of we're the union that Dr. King gave his life for, and use that as an organizing tool.
Somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest for rights.
Memphis was unlike a lot of other places because the workers in Memphis decided themselves they wanted to build a union. You go to other places, you got to convince people that the union is worthwhile. And for back in those days, and probably still now, workers at the lowest level of the workforce, it's always risk versus reward with them. You can't promise and not produce. You can't suggest that they stand before an employer that really holds life and death, in a sense, over their livelihoods. After the Memphis strike, we saw the other example in Charleston, South Carolina. That's right. Where those workers, for reasons I suspect similarly, wound up in the same position. We're going to fight until we get a union. That has to be a worker's decision. And I think we were successful in many places with that model. In those days, our union was growing at the rate of about 50,000+ net new members each year. So the idea of public sector employees having rights that entitled them to have a union caught on. Prior to that, the idea of organizing a public sector union in the Deep South was just, unheard of.
Right. And it feels like it's sort of back to the future. I mean, we're in a situation now where public sector workers are losing their rights. What about in the South?
In spite of the setbacks that we've had, in the South, public sector workers and predominantly black public sector workers see the value in having a union that is able to speak for them and with them. I would reference the recent Chattanooga organizing loss. Not because black workers weren't committed to it, simply the message and the value of organizing was not disseminated in a way that the overwhelming majority of the workforce decided it was something they wanted to do. We see examples all across the South, and particularly in the blue-collar section. Equally true in the healthcare and health delivery sector. The public sector for a long time has been sort of the entry point for black workers into meaningful employment. As bad as some of the jobs were, they were jobs that folks could get into. And I think particularly in the South, the lack of commitment to organizing reflects itself in different ways. It reflects itself in the political system. Simply because you've got 18 or 19 right-to-work states, and there's a lack of willingness to organize in the states, that means you give up 18 or 19 major political seats without even a contest. And that also means that small group of legislative types can in effect set the political agenda around workers' rights.
For the whole country.
For the whole country.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And we see that happen now, where right to work for many, many years was by and large limited to the old Confederacy.
That's right.
You now see it moving into more industrial states, Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, and the effort for politicians of much more conservative nature to say, well, we want a right to work bill in our legislature. And you find some workers say, well, that's not a bad idea. Well, it's a dreadful idea. Because what it does is subjugates the workforce to low wages, low benefits, and affects other parts of the social agenda.
Now, in 1972, you were involved in forming the Coalition of Black Trade Unions.
Right.
With I still remain very impressed every time I look at the names of the people that were assembled. I mean, the heavy hitters in black labor. Let me ask you a controversial question, though. There was already an organization, the A. Philip Randolph Institute, that had been set up by the AFL-CIO in, I believe, 1967 or something. You and others decided that there needed to be something else. How did you arrive at that decision?
Well, we went through the experience of a long, drawn-out primary contest for the presidency of the United States that involved, initially, I guess, Hubert Humphrey, et cetera, but George McGovern wound up being the nominee of the Democratic Party. And I believe it was Richard Nixon, the nominee of the Republican Party.
Right.
And we had heard and had experienced their economic and social views for years. And when push came to shove, the American labor movement said, well, we're neutral. Well, there is a difference between George McGovern and Richard Nixon.
Indeed.
And at least in the black community, being neutral means one is no better or worse than the other. Well, that couldn't sit with us. We spent not only the time listening to their views, their economic projections, their social views, et cetera. And we couldn't go, at least I couldn't go back home and tell people, do whatever you think is right. I mean, the McGovern agenda, which most of us had participated in trying to shape, had tremendous meaning for black workers. And the Federation, the FL-CIO, while it may or may not have had the authority to be neutral, it certainly didn't consider our views while taking that position. Mr. Randolph was an incredible champion of working people, not just black workers, but workers in general, sat on the Executive Council. I think at that time, C.L. Dellums was on the council. It became clear to us that either they were not heard or they could not speak, one of the two. And we thought clearly that here is a need for black workers to coalesce around a very clear set of issues that were important in the long run. Richard Nixon, who sort of developed the Southern strategy.
Indeed he did.
How could black labor leadership go back to black workers and say, well, there's very little difference between these two. And we felt that there was a real need for us to have a conversation about this problem. And out of that conversation, perhaps, would come an idea of what to do. So we, of course, we didn't have emails and Twitters and all that kind of stuff. So our effort was word of mouth, to talk to other people who we knew or might have been concerned about this issue, or if they were not concerned about it, to let them know about it.
So that was in 1973.
1973.
And the coalition has been meeting on Memorial Day weekends ever since.
Ever since. We figured Memorial Day weekend was a good weekend for people to meet. If they thought this was an important enough issue, they would use that holiday to do it. We didn't ask anybody to underwrite our activity. We felt that if it was an important enough issue, then people would figure out how to get to the meeting, whether they'd come out of their pocket, come out of their bank account, or whatever. We wanted to be free enough and independent enough to have an open discussion and conversation on any issue that had implications for black workers. And we weren't convinced that we could do that if we were on somebody's funding string.
What's the argument for the continued relevance of a coalition of black trade unionists?
Well, at the time, the presence of blacks in the policy-making apparatus of the Federation was like limited, both at the national level and at the state and local level. Our view was first that the American labor movement needs to change its structure so that it can hear all elements of its broad coalition. And so we began our fight to create space on the Executive Council for African Americans, Hispanics, Asians, women, et cetera, because that's the labor movement. So we spent a number of years working on that, and finally in 1995, we achieved that breakthrough.
That was with the election of John Sweeney.
Election of John Sweeney
and Chavez Thompson.
Right.
That's right.
Right. And the council was expanded by 12, 13 seats or something like that. Not set aside for blacks, but in recognition of the fact that there are major black leaders in affiliate organizations that have every right to participate at this level of the American labor movement. So we obviously took advantage of that. The labor movement has changed considerably since then, and needs to change more. The movement is not the movement that it needs to be in order for blacks and other workers of color to benefit from the work that it does. And
What do you mean?
Well, I think the nickel more an hour union is gone. While it's important, I think labor now has to be the core, or the center of a broad social movement whose mission goes beyond just the workplace. It's involved in the issues of public policy relating to justice, relating to equal opportunity, relating to equity on a gender basis. It has to take on all of those as a part of its mission and has to organize and advocate around those issues. It's not at the point where it can do that now. And maybe sometime before we see that, but we have to start it. And one of the classic examples is Ferguson. When you look at Ferguson, I mean, it's like you read the Kerner report.
Right.
Again, I mean, what is fundamentally different now than it was in 67, 68? And every state has its Ferguson. So if we're going to deal with some of the problems that grow out of that, then organized labor and its allies on both sides of the track has to come to the table with ideas about how do we create a society that has opportunities built in as a part of that society's mission for people to take advantage of what are God-given rights. We should not be, quarreling now about the need for sound education policies. We should not be quarreling over the question of inadequate services at the municipal level. We should not be quarreling over, clearly political and discriminatory decisions made at local levels that deny folks access to the political process.
You have an organization of black trade unionists, and anytime black folks get together, white folks tend to get nervous. All right, now, the CBTU, but as you said, was not controlled by someone else. This was a black organization. What's the balance between raising hell and sort of working on the inside?
Well, we were hell raisers, but not around anything that wasn't reality. I mean, the issues we worked on were foundations of the trade union movement. We just simply said that the policies that we want to participate in must come from a black perspective, not to the exclusion of anybody else, but to the inclusion of our views. And I would hasten to say that on the major issues of the day, we have been right much more than we have been wrong. And historically, you know, black labor has not been a part of the discussion of national economic policy or international economic policy. We have not been a part of the discussion around trade. And the implications of trade are so devastating for us. We have not been at the table when folks had great discussions and debate over the questions of war and peace.
That's right.
And for those...
Or migration.
Immigration.
Right.
Immigration. And our argument has been, and continues to be, that our problem is not so much immigration as it is migration, flowing from the policies of this administration and ones before it. And that if in the long run, workers are going to suffer the consequences of decisions, then they ought to have an opportunity to be a part of making the decision. Indeed. And there's nothing radical about that. I mean, and we see the changes taking place where the Federation has to develop a policy, but it's never felt a need to involve our thinking before. And you, when the apartheid issue came up, nobody was surprised. Everybody said, "Oh yeah, well that's wrong." The question is, what are we going to do about it? And I hasten to say what the CBTU decided to do about it was confront it head on. I mean, you can't have a policy of constructive engagement with evil.
Right.
And if the Federation was uncomfortable about us speaking at that point, that's something that they have to wrestle with. Because the fact that whether it's Africa or Latin and Central America, our policies have impacted working people. And working people look to the leader of the free world in terms of labor organization to help.
This has been a real honor and pleasure.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to get together.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much for the invitation. My pleasure.
Really
My pleasure.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us for this episode of The Global African. I'm your host, Bill Fletcher. Thanks.
Can we ask our panel to come forward and take a seat? Hi, for those of you who do not know me, my name is Rosalind Spigner. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Social Action Committee of the Queens Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta, and this is my co-chair in the back, Armenta Weeks. And so we're so happy that you braved the cold to come out and join us this afternoon. In the spirit of Dr. King, we decided that we wanted to have a program to highlight the Black middle class. Southeast Queens is made up of Black middle class, and many of us are members of unions. So we just thought that it would be ideal to have this type of discussion this afternoon. My chapter president, Dr. Marie Carmel Durandis, was unable to join us this afternoon. She is at home on bed rest, but we are going to move forward. Is Sora Rosalind Gross Hall here? She's still here? Come on up and bring us some greetings. And then after that, I am going to introduce our moderator, Jacques Leandre, Esquire.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just want to say welcome and welcome to Moriah City. I am the administrator operator here at Mount Moriah. And just on behalf of Reverend Robert Lowe, we want to say welcome. As you can see, we are having issues on the coldest day of 2019 with the heat. So he apologizes greatly, but he did not want to cancel this because of the importance behind the message. So we just want to say welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for choosing us to work with you, my sorors and my job. But we are always open for other types of services like this with our leaders, just to let you know that we're available to do more because we need to know more, amen? We need to inform our community of the things that are happening right under their noses, but because they don't come out to get the information, they go lacking. So we just need more things, more forums, more information to come out. So again, we welcome you to Moriah City, and thank you so much. Sora?
Thank you. Okay, I don't know if he needs any introduction. Everyone has their program, Jacques Leandre Esquire. He has actually been our MC, I don't know, for about 5-6 years now. We just love him, and we invite him every year. Anytime he wants to come and moderate for us, he is welcome. And he actually works for a union, and he's going to tell you a little bit about that. But Jacques, we're so happy to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. The scarf that I have on, I promise you, is not a fashion statement. And if the good Reverend was here, I would ask him permission to put on my hat. Because at one time, I wouldn't need a hat. But since God blessed me with this beautiful bald round head, in this weather, I would love to put a hat on. But my name is Jacques Leandre, and for full disclosure, I am a unionist. I come from a background of union. Both my parents worked for Flushing General Hospital. They were members for 27 years of 1199, and I know that I wouldn't be in the position that I am today but for the job that they had of a union job, the job security, the health benefits, and just being from immigrant parents, being born in Haiti. They, of course, were born in Haiti, came here, although they were pretty educated in Haiti, but you know, that immigrant story, you come in and do what you need to do to feed your family and educate your family, and they had the security of a union job that helped them to do that. So we are forever grateful in my family for the union. And today we have a powerful, powerful, powerful panel of union leaders in New York City, in New York State, and actually we have some international and national union leadership up here. Let's give them a round of applause. I think this one is, oh, okay. And there are so many, is it working? Okay, thank you. There are so many topics to cover, but when we talk about labor, when we talk about unions, Southeast Queens has the highest union density in New York City, and in fact, in New York State. I don't think you can go anywhere in the city of New York or in Southeast Queens where you meet someone and at least a half a person away is connected to a union. When you talk about the middle class, you're talking about unions. When you talk about Southeast Queens and these beautiful homes that are manicured lawns, you're talking about unions built Southeast Queens. So I think it's fitting that our wonderful sisters of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated bring this forum to Southeast Queens. Let's give our wonderful sisters of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated a round of applause. You have the bios, and we want to thank the Social Action Committee, Mindy Weeks, co-chair, for editing the bios. She said especially of the men, because she asked for a brief bio, and brothers submitted in a whole encyclopedia set of their accomplishments, whereas our wonderful sisters, they complied with the request that was made. We have with us, first from Local 371, President of the Social Service Employees Union. He's also International Vice President of ASME, a good brother right here from Southeast Queens. Went to August Martin High School. I think he was the first graduating class of August Martin High School, Mr. Anthony Wells. We have another brother from this community as well, and he filled in some like large shoes. Some of our elders may know Dr. Charlie Hughes, who was from Southeast Queens, president of Local 372. Well, now we have the president of Local 372 from Southeast Queens, went to Jamaica High School, President Sean D. Francois I. And Sean also serves as a vice president on District Council 37, where Brother Wells also serves. We have with us Gina Strickland, the first vice president of Local 1180 CWA. Gina Strickland. Her passport has been stamped from the People's Republic of Brooklyn, Gina Strickland. We also have, and you've seen him on the news lately, this brother is a firebrand. Do not mess with the correction officers, or in his words, he says, come see me. Brother Elias Husamaddin from the COBA, the Correctional Officers Benevolent Association. Thank you so much for being here. And I don't think lastly, no, it's not lastly, but he's the only millennial on the panel, although all of them look like millennials. But we have Brother Amir Abadi from the CCA Metro. He's the Metro's director of the community relations of Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island. Young brother doing wonderful things from Southeast Queens as well. No, I'm trying to read through. This is like one of the vanguard. See, I'm a brother from Q Psi Phi. So we know how to take orders from our wonderful sisters of Delta. And I'm going to take the orders. Rosalind is the taskmaster. Yes, ma'am. We have Janella Hines. She's the VP for Academic High Schools, Secretary-Treasurer of the New York City Central Labor Council, and teacher of social studies, and one of the powerful, dynamic leaders, and also a millennial. Princeton. Yeah. I'm throwing that in there. Millennial. And also Princeton graduate as well, which I think is phenomenal. Janella Hines. Because oftentimes, when we get a certain amount of education, certain amount of talent, certain amount of resources, we tend not to bring it back home. And Janella Hines found that it wasn't robbery to bring her talent, her resources back to the union, and we want to thank you for that, Janella. We're going to get straight into this discussion, which the theme is preserving our unions, fighting for social justice. And recently, the Supreme Court had rendered a decision in the Janus case. Who's familiar with the Janus case? The Janus case. We're going to start with Brother Anthony Wells, who's also an attorney, to give us an overview of what the Janus case is and some of the implications it has for the working unionists.
So thank you for having us here. Thank you for inviting us, Ms. Winger and Ms. Weeks, and my regards to your president. Before I start, I want to say two things. One, this is awesome. And watching that film, both films, I was with Bill Lucy in Washington this weekend. And to be able to talk to somebody whose history is just awesome. We had John Lewis. And you got to take advantage of those opportunities. Also, Sean and I are now national board members of CBTU. So we're doing that kind of stuff too. Janus very simply is a part of a movement to destroy unions. Okay, it was a Supreme Court case that said that you do not have to join a union, not have to pay dues, but you get all the benefits of being a member of that union. Okay, there was a case before that. Where my people? Help me out. Friedrichs. Thank you. Friedrichs in California, that would have had the same result, except for Scalia died. Forgive me, Lord, but he was that day, I say God was a union man. And I say that because he was trying to kill us. I'm sorry, I don't apologize. He is trying to destroy unions, which is destroying our families. So what Janus said, simply to the point, was that you can now get union benefits without paying your dues. You could be a freeloader and not pay dues. And they're hoping that people cut off. Without money, folks, no organization can function, including the unions. Okay, so what this has forced some unions to do is go back to doing what they're supposed to do, organizing workers and doing services for their members. Okay? And so that's just what happened. There are other cases that come along. There's a case in the now where people are suing to get their dues back that they paid before the decision was made, okay, which is talking about millions. Yeah, it's crazy, right? Millions and millions of dollars. This is not going to stop. But this was their first big victory. And how do we counteract that? Well, we counteract that, like I said, very simple. It's a very simple formula. Service your members. You know, service your members and get them involved. Listen to what they have to say. I'm glad the brother's here. I never can pronounce the word, so I call them nimnums, okay? But you gotta get young people involved. And for the seasoned leaders, you can't be afraid of young people. And you can't be afraid of somebody being smarter than you. You cannot be afraid of somebody having an idea that you did not think of. And you must know how to incorporate that. And you can't be afraid of who you are. So Janice ties that all in. And I say two things. One, Dr. Martin Luther King, we paraphrase him all the time, all labor has value. But as unions go in this country, folks, so goes this country. When unions were doing well, the middle class was built. And people thrived. I come from a civil service family, but we became union. My forefathers were civil servants, post office workers, and clerks and everything else. But our generation made us union. What would the next generation do?
Thank you, President Wells. And Janella, President Wells talked a bit about millennials. He called them millennials. But young people getting involved in the labor movement. And I know you're in the education space. Can you tell us a little bit about what, if any, is being done to engage young people as young as teenagers as far as labor is concerned?
First, I want to thank everyone for being here this afternoon, and many thanks, Sorors Spigner and Soror Weeks. Thank you for your leadership in this work. I think about the young people that I teach, and I teach in Brooklyn. I live in Brooklyn as well. The young people that I teach don't often have exposure to all of the people who make this city run, right? They don't realize that it is an organized workforce that has those trains running, that takes care of those buses, that is picking up our trash on the sidewalks, or that their teachers and guidance counselors and secretaries and principals are members of unions. And so what we have tried to do with the UFT and the Central Labor Council, and this will be our third year, is we expose young people to unionized careers. Kids go to college fairs all the time, but what we've decided to create is a career fair because we want to expose young people to unionized careers in healthcare, in education, in entertainment, in the building trades, right? Because what often happens is our families are out there working hard and not necessarily telling the children that we're members of unions. We are not necessarily incorporating the importance of collective action and collective voice to our young people. And so we wanted to carve out a day where we could talk to them about collective bargaining agreements, pensions and retirement security, and the working benefits that come from being employed in a unionized career. So that's going to be coming up, and if any of you are members of unions and you would be interested in presenting to our young people on March 14th at the UFT, please, please, please let me know before we leave here today.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hine. And Amir, let's segue into actually being a young person in the labor movement. What are some of the challenges that you faced being in the labor movement as a young person, and what are some of the benefits?
So the interesting thing, as you mentioned, there's been a tidal wave of change and support for labor in just the last 20 years. If they did a poll, there was a poll the AFL-CIO released that said in 2008, there was a 48% approval for labor unions. Today, it's something like 62%. And I'm not going to toot my own horn, but I think a sizable amount of that is due to the fact that millennials are coming into the workforce, and they see they do not have health care benefits. They see that retirement is further away from them than a generation or two before them. They see that they're having a huge headwind in their way, and they know only through the brothers and sisters of labor do they actually have a shot at the middle class. You could get the college degree and pray that it works for you, but a labor union is going to get your back. And that is something that a generation of workers are starting to remember again. So as we're talking about millennials in labor, I'm hoping this is a revival. I'm hoping we hit rock bottom and we're bouncing back, and there's another generation or two demanding the same respect and the same market share that they used to have.
Thank you so much. And now, Gina, we talked about education. We talked about young people being involved in the labor movement. It's our understanding that you attended the Cornell ILR Union Leadership Institute. Can you speak to what that institute actually had done for you and some of the future labor leaders in New York City?
I went to that institute, and it was paid through from my union. I was on staff at that time, and the then President Arthur Chiliotis wanted everybody that came in to understand the what union is about. It was a year-long program up in Albany, and it was a mixture of different people from different unions. But we all came there together and we learned what unions have done for this, I say, nation, really. Because the first time I started working, I worked at Macy's. I just had a baby and I worked at Macy's, and they said, okay, we're unionized. And I know what a union was, but I know that I got benefits. And I just thought that any job that you go to, you just get benefits and you don't have to pay for them. But it was a rude awakening that when I left Macy's and went somewhere else, then to find out I had to pay for health care and different things like that. But going through this year-long program, it showed you the history, just like what you just saw, the history, where the people fought for where we are today. It also gave training on contract negotiations. It gave training on the real, I say the substance of any union is having good shop stewards, because the shop stewards are those that are at the work site, so they can talk to their fellow co-workers about the importance of being in the union. That's a program that I went to, and subsequently every year we send 3 people. It may be costly, but it's worth it in the end, because educating people about unions and what it does for everybody, because the question should be, for those that are not in the union, should ask, why is wherever I work, why is it not unionized? That's what the question should be. Because a lot of people will say, well, unions, oh, y'all got pension. Okay, you should ask, I need a pension too. Instead of, some people be down in unions, this or whatever, but the question, and that's what we've trying to do. I just segue a little bit about Janice, because one thing that Janice did to a lot of unions is make us do things differently. At CWA Local 1180, we brought back the retirees. We stole a little of that from DC 37, but we brought back our retirees and we called them the Membership Brigade. And what it is, the Membership Brigade, which is 3 or 4 retirees, go out to the work site and talk to the current members that are working there. And they're having this discussion. Who better to talk about the benefits of being in union than those that live through it? They are now reaping the benefits of being a union member, having retiree benefits. And Local 1180, we have a retirees division. But everybody should be, trying to find a union. If your job doesn't have one, how do we get to be a union? So seek, if you're not in a job that doesn't have a union, then
call us, because we have an organizer, and we can start organizing you to get into a union.
Thank you so very much. The next question is actually for President Francois. We understand with this event today, it's community, labor, politics, all in one. You discussed earlier about a labor to neighbor concept where unions are actually immersed in the neighborhoods, in the various social movements and activisms in our community. Can you talk to us a bit about that?
Yeah, first of all, good evening, everybody. Hello to all. Thanks to Armina Weeks and Roger Spigner. Thanks for having us here, and to all the other panelists. Yeah, I came up with the phrase labor to neighbor, because a lot of times we understand that in labor is still part of our community. We understand that in labor sometimes the work that we do there affects the community. So a lot of times people try to separate the two. And as labor leaders, sometimes it's hard for us when we deal with different communities because we deal with all types of races. And me as a black leader, sometimes when I deal with a certain race that I apply myself into, you might have certain neighborhoods that don't agree with that. I'll be honest with you, like places like Staten Island. Sometimes it's careful to come out with the things that I feel that it's necessary and justice-wise to bring things out in the open to hear other members, because I'm member-driven. I'm here because of my members. So if I start talking about other things that other neighborhoods don't like, I feel like I'm outcasted for somewhere else. But I can't be scared and fearful to bring out justice and the truth to what is needed to be in the community. We have a society that has to bring back that village. I remember years ago, as a child growing up, I remember Mr. Johnson telling me to go home, especially when the lights are about to come on. And I'm like, okay, Mr. Johnson, I'm going home in a minute, I'll be home very soon. The problem is today, that same Mr. Johnson tells you to go home, it's like he gets the middle scream, he gets the middle finger. Oh, you ain't my mother, you ain't my father. And this is the problem we have today. We have to bring back that society that we was as a family structure. We have to bring back those games that we used to play, the life and Monopoly and stuff as a family. Today, we so much on our cell phones and stuff like that, we don't have no nonsense of what's going on in the world. We don't see what's going on around us. We could be walking and jaywalking and you don't even know a car can hit you anytime. So I have an issue, that's another segment at some other time, with humanity versus technology. Technology is good. As you know, we need technology. But sometimes, to me, it affects a little bit of humanity. It takes away the structure of what we once was born on, raised on. And we need that back. We need to get that back, because that's what made the middle class what it was. That's what made us what we are today. Because I know I was born on a union family. My funds, my benefits came from union. So to say to do away with union like the Janice tried to do with us is nonsense. And if I be honest with you guys, Janice didn't make us worse. It made us better. It woke us up. It made us see what's going on right now and the realism and the reality of the world. And made people like millennials come up and say, you know what, wow, look what's going on. Do we want to follow that step? Do we want to move in the same direction? No, we want to make sure the direction we move in is a nice direction, is a course direction, so we can make sure that we're in the right path. And this is what we want to do, bring labor to neighbor to make sure that we are on the right path, the right solutions to make the problems happen, to make sure that we make the solutions occur and make sure they already are.
Thank you, President Francois. And that brings us to the point where we must really address some of the real situations we have in our community with our young people. Many of our young people at this time, they don't feel that there's any hope or anything beyond the streets. So it's gambling, smoking, drinking, stabbing, shooting. And for many of our young folks we deal with, they think that going to college is just not reachable. And I got to tell you, I worked at Rikers Island for 2 years as a law school student, and C-74, some of the more violent facilities. And the most brilliant minds that I had encountered as young people actually were behind the walls, not outside. Most brilliant. However, they were now confined to a 6x8 cell, whatever the case may be, and some of the most brilliant people I met, believe it or not. Because a lot of times, you know, we think about prison life, we think about jail, and we think about the most abject folks there. But with some of the correction officers that I met on that journey, and we have the president of the Correction Officers Association, who has a very difficult job in managing politics, membership, and everything else in between. There's a raging discussion now on shutting down Rikers Island. There's a raging discussion now on what are the jobs of a correction officer. Are they there for crime prevention? Are they psychiatrists? Are they sociologists? Whatever it may be. But we have the president, who we would like to get some remarks from in terms of how do you balance the whole political piece and your membership, because there are some serious demands that your membership have, and there's also some serious issues that you have with the mayor. I know you've been boxing with him in the media for a little bit, but you're looking good. He got a couple bruises, but you're looking good, brother.
Well, you couldn't give me an easy question. Good afternoon, everybody. First, I know Anthony, Queens. I'm from Harlem, by way of Charleston, South Carolina. Pretty much I have organizing and union in my blood. My father, William Bill Saunders of Charleston, South Carolina, was very instrumental during the 60s in helping 1199 and the healthcare workers achieve and be able to unionize. Just to speak about Janus for a second, I believe that the architects of Janus thought that by coming here, that they were going to, in some way, weaken or destroy the unions, or make the unions a little bit weaker than they were, and I think they might have been sadly disappointed. I know as far as my union is concerned, I think maybe 1 or 2 people actually did. I have approximately 11,000 members, and they're all union members still, even after Janus. Because I have a lot of millennials who, like Amir said, understand a lot more than people think they do. I think that one of the things that we have to do as unions is we have to act, and watching these videos and these films, we have to actually go back to unionizing. I think that at some point unions stop unionizing. There was a time, I think even as a young kid, I could sit here and I could sing this song to you, and probably most of you out here can sing it. If I started saying, look for the union label when you are buying a dress blouse or skirt. I know most of us remember that. And that was a time when unions was, unionizing. Unions was making sure that everyone understood the importance of unions and of union jobs. And I think we have to get back to that. As far as correction officers concerned, law enforcement officers, which we are, if you look at a lot of the organizing and the demonstrating, sometimes it may appear that we weren't there, that we were not there. But in essence, we were there and we are there. Because of what we do, in our job, it's kind of difficult for us to be as out front or in social issues as most unions. But for of late, when you have the organizations of, let's just say 100 blacks in law enforcement now, lately law enforcement officers have been stepping forward and getting out front in the issues that affect us socially. To address what you talk about, as a correction officer, I believe that correction officers, especially here in New York City, I think we're probably one of the most attacked. We're under more attack than most unions are, because we walk that fine line, and we actually don't get the credit that we deserve. Usually most people, when they're talking about correction officers, they only want to talk about the isolated incidents or the incidents where people talk about bad apple. But the work that correction officers do, most people won't believe. Just quickly, and you can stop me because I can talk about correction officers all day, because we're it. We're the bomb. We got it going on. I mean, despite what most people think. Just 2018, real quick. Although we took in custody more than 60,000 New Yorkers, 60,000 people in custody, we were able to keep the violence, the use of force, down to below 6,000. Now, to some people, they're like 6,000. Yeah, when you count 60,000 people and the caliber of people that we get, and we're able to keep those numbers down that low, trust me, that's a feat, and that's something that we should actually be given a medal for. And I say that all the time, because out of the 6,000 use of forces, 65% of those use of forces didn't involve any injury to inmates or officers. And, you know, when you look at the fact that correction officers are running the largest mental health facility on the East Coast, and we have where they tell us that, well, they said 40% of the 8,000 inmates we have on a daily basis have been diagnosed with mental illness. And they say that 14% of them have been diagnosed with serious mental illness. And who do you think are with these mentally ill people? And we take them to the pharmacist, they get a drug, they go. We take them, the psych comes, sees them for 1 hour every 2 weeks. We're with them 24 hours a day. We have to know their triggers. We have to know what set them off. We have to know what happens when they don't get their medication. We have to know what happens after they get their medication. So at the end of the day, we're union people. And we're union people doing this job every day. Someone earlier talked about the 60,000 homeless people. You know how many homeless people we have in jail, right? And who do you think is there caring for them? I mean, there's so many things that correction officers do, and it's my job, and I will continue to do that to let everybody know that this is what we do. We have them. Rory, I can't let him get away with it. I mean, you know, he talks about how many people on Rikers Island, but him and all the other people running for public advocate, I'm not hearing them say anything about the $30 billion of the taxpayers' money that they want to use to build 5 new jails to house these Black and Latino people, right? When we could take $30 billion, and I know what this community could use with just $1 billion of that to create job training, after school, and a whole lot of things that will actually keep the kids or the people out of jail. So, I mean, I'll stop. And,
Thank you much.
Continue.
At this time, we're going to ask our audience if you have any questions to line up at that mic to my left. I see a lot of invisible question marks over some of your heads. It's not that cold. You can stand up and get a little warm. I see Alan Barrett approaching the microphone because he always has questions.
Before we get started, can I just add something to what the previous person said?
Well, hold on. Alan, are you thinking of your question while? Okay. No. Go ahead, Amir.
I just want to build on what the last two brothers said because I think it's very important. We do need to organize better because our adversaries have been organizing after our success. The Janus decision was a puppet decision. At the end of the day, the Cato Institute was instrumental. This is a conservative think tank with billionaires funding its pockets who created this case, found this man, and ended up hiring this man after he damaged our union. And this is something that is systemic. We are seeing very, very rich people hire very, very smart people to try and sabotage us from the inside. That is what's happening. And we need to be organized enough to see it and fight it head on. In my union, the Carpenters, right now, our big threat is open shop. The real estate board, the richest people in New York, are saying they can't afford to pay people a living wage to build skyscrapers. Skyscrapers. We are fighting for skyscrapers to be paid a living wage because $15 an hour is what they think you should be making when you're at 1,000 feet up in the air. That's ridiculous to me. And Long Island City built non-union. Brooklyn built non-union. At the end of the day, there's a 40-45% minority population in the Carpenters Union. Across the building trades, we're seeing diversity we have not seen in the last generation. And as this diversity pops up, suddenly the conversation over whether a job should be union or not starts to pop up. Suddenly, when Black and brown people get into the trade, why should we have the trade at all? That's a conversation I want to have because that don't make sense to me. I just got in the door. Don't you dare slam it behind me.
Great point. That was well worth it, Brother Amir. So if not, we can ask a couple more questions that I have, but...
Well, I just got one thing to say, too. It's forums like this is coalitions. You look what Dr. King did. He built coalitions. Civil rights was the umbrella, but he built coalitions. We got a lot of people, black people, brown people, organizations, the Greeks. We got to get involved. That's how we resolve this, because if we don't see it as all of our problems, then we begin to separate it out. Okay? And it's not just middle class folks, it's working families. Because that gap and that creation of the middle class, it ain't like it is. Middle class people have 2 jobs now. They got 2 jobs. People who work every day are living in shelters. Okay? So this is about us having coalitions and working together and recognizing our diversity. We're not going to have the same mind. This thing about people have to walk lockstep is a fallacy. It never really was. Even in the civil rights movement, there was different thoughts. And never forget, there was Malcolm and there was Martin. And if it was not a Malcolm, it would not have been as big a Martin. 2 different schools of thought going for the same thing. So as we do this, and I say it before, our Greek brothers and sisters, y'all got some powerful organizations with some powerful voices. I heard Greg Meeks name 20 people, okay? I'm glad Maxine is in charge of the banking system, but she don't address the criminal banking system that charges you 20% to borrow your money and give you 0.05. If nobody addresses that, I'm not impressed. We no longer be impressed with title and positions. We must be impressed with what you, like the brother said, what COs do and what all our workers do. So it ain't just enough to say, oh yeah, that's great. What you gonna do with it? Adam Clayton Powell had a thing. What's in your hand, boy? So I want to say that before we get to that question, because that's what this is about.
Thank you, President. And very quickly, I had received this note a couple of minutes ago, and I failed to inform you all. We are streaming, so we're asking everyone who has a microphone, speak into the microphone, because we have an audience out there that's actually listening to this in a remote location. So if you could speak into the microphone, thank you.
Okay, how's that? Is that good?
Hold on 1 second. Is that good? A little closer, please.
Okay. So my name is Diana Byrne. I'm a social worker. And at one time in my city career, I did work at the Department of Corrections, and I was on Rikers Island. And I know that our president, my current president, Anthony Wells, has raised the issue of raising the age. And a lot of our youth, of that 60,000 that has been arrested and incarcerated, are, whether they're detainees or sentenced, are youth. And while correction officers are there, not as social workers, but it is a strong issue of the youth and how they are handled in the sense of, maintaining the decorum of being in the residence. So my question to you is, how is the correctional officer to deal with the young people, the young population that is at C-74 or C-4?
Currently, 16 and 17-year-olds are no longer on Rikers Island or inside the New York City jails. They actually have been placed in a place in the Bronx called Horizon. Correctional officers are there with this particular population. We don't believe and we don't feel that we have enough resources in order to deal with them. We're still missing the most important link that should be there, which is represented by Tony, by President Wells, the youth development specialist, juvenile counselor. But at the end of the day, with what we have and with what we've been given by this city and by this state to deal with that particular population, we're doing the best that we can to do that. Do we need more resources? Yes. Can we use more training? Yes. Can they use more programming? Yes. But do we also have to address the fact that some of them are criminals? Yes, we should. I'm not sure if that answers your question. Maybe Tony has something else to add to that. But
the only thing is to say this: the law had good intentions. I haven't had worked in Spofford when the law was created, treating young people as adults over 30, 40, almost 40 years ago. Okay, and they did the right thing. That it should not happen anymore. You can't. But they did it and they rushed it because they made it a political thing. They made it part of the shutting down Rikers rather than let's give this population what they need. And so Elias is in there, the correctional officers are there temporarily because they had to move them, and the mayor and the governor played fighting with each other. Neither one wanted to tell the other, I need help. And so they're there. This is not set up. It's not done correctly. CEOs are doing a heck of a job. We're hiring youth development specialists. You know, anybody who has a background with children, they go get them a job because they're hiring. And I mean, they're hiring hundreds of people. But all the resources are not there, and they have to be there because this is a unique population now. Okay?
Let me just say one other thing. And it just goes back to what I said earlier. For whatever reason, the city and the state of New York seems to have no problem spending $300 million to upgrade and open up Horizon in the Bronx and Crossroads in Brooklyn to house these 16 and 17-year-olds. But they don't seem to be able to put the resources where it needs to be to actually keep them out of this place. They seem to be prepared to spend $30 billion to build 5 new jails to house people, but they don't seem to be prepared to spend $30 billion to stop or prevent or do anything to stop them from coming.
I just want to add to that. We also need to have the conversation about what we're going to do with these people when they get out. Because this brother does his union does the best they can while they're inside. But when they get out, what do they come out to? Now, the building trades has actually one of the sizable population of ex-cons of any trade. And that is because at the end of the day, if you could swing a hammer or put up a board, it doesn't matter what your record is or what mistakes you've made. And it is things like that that make me proud to work alongside brothers and sisters no matter what their backgrounds are. Because at the end of the day, it's about doing the job. And giving that person that jobs keeps them out of places like the Horizon and Crossroads. Giving them an opportunity outside of the regular college and maybe I could work at McDonald's making $15 an hour, that's not for everybody. For some people, they want to work with their hands. They want to build the building that they're never going to be able to, they want to be able to build the building that is going to change the skyline of New York City. That's the kind of things that make people wake up every morning. If you don't give a person that kind of hope for their future, they're going to go right back to where they came from. And that's not a circumstance that you want to be in. That's the prison cycle. We got to get people out of that by talking about where to put them next. And there are union opportunities that put you into the middle class without that education that you either don't want or are not suited for.
Great point.
I would just add to that very quickly that in our high schools here in New York State, we do have programs in career and technical education that allow our students to graduate from high school with the certification to go directly into unionized careers. Because it's true, not every student wants to pursue a 4-year degree, right? And so making sure that those opportunities remain available for our students is incredibly important. I would just also say that some of the resources that the brother is talking about that need to be spent before students get into the system need to be embedded in our schools. Educators don't have the resources we need to interrupt those children that are going down the wrong path, right? And so you have a classroom in a high school, 34 students. I have Regents exams that are coming up next week. I'm thinking about all of the things that I need to do in order to make sure that my checklist is handled, and that may not allow me to get to the root of all of the concerns that the students are bringing to the classroom with them, whether it is living in temporary housing or not having enough food to eat or not having appropriate clothing on a day like this, right? And students bring all of that into the school. And without the appropriate resources, we do have students who are making the wrong decisions and ending up in Horizons and Crossroads.
Okay. I have one announcement, and then I have my question. The announcement is when everyone entered, they received index cards. Everyone has an index card. So if you're not comfortable coming to the mic, you can pass your index cards to one of our members, and we'll be glad to pass your question on to the moderator. Now, my question has to do with the invisible correction officer, because every time a question is addressed to the union or the Department of Corrections, it always goes back to the inmate. Correction officers are individuals who work in and live in the community. They pay tax dollars, they go to work, most of them are professional. I was one myself for 20 years. So my question is to the union president, Elias. What can we do, because there's always an attack on the correction officer. What can we do to prevent the dehumanizing of officers? How can your union, our union, establish better PR to make them more human and more visible in our communities?
I think, it's a good question. In all honesty, for correction officers, that's an uphill battle. And it really doesn't matter where you are in this country. Real quick if I can. I have this thing that I call the American DNA. And the American DNA, for most people, the American DNA for police officers as cops is what? That person that's helping little Becky across the street. The one that's going to come when you call because you're having a domestic problem. The one that's going to respond to help you. That's mostly what's in the DNA for police officers and cops in this country. What's in the DNA for firefighters? That big red truck. That truck that's going to come and get Fluffy out of the tree and it's going to throw Grandma over the shoulder and bring her out of the burning building. Usually, what's in the DNA for Americans with correction officers, prison guards? Depending on your age, James Cagney, Shawshank Redemption, Orange is the New Blue or New Black. The crazy things that happen in Oz. I mean, one of my favorite shows, Scandal, when the dude, one of the guys got arrested, Cyrus got arrested, they put him in jail, a correction officer set him up in the yard to get hurt. That's basically what's in the DNA for Americans. So it's an uphill battle for me and for the union every day trying to say to people that, look at this, New York City correction officers are the most educated correction officers in this country. At least 85% of my members have either a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree. Usually, just in looking at what's been going on as far as shutting down Rikers, rather than saying that we want that 420 acres of land, rather than saying that we're looking to extend LaGuardia's runway, rather than saying we want the land, they say we have to shut it down because correction officers have created a culture of violence. But yet and still, when a child is killed in a school, we don't say that teachers are creating a culture of violence. When they're stabbed and shot in school, when they're killing each other in the street, we don't say that the streets is creating a culture of violence. So to answer your question, as a union, we've been fighting hard and a long time. Billboards, radio commercials, radio shows, everything to to inform the public. I think the best public relations that we could use is this. Out of my 22,000 active and retired correction officers, 65% of us live in the 5 boroughs. And I think the best public relations tool that we could use is our mothers and our fathers and our sisters and brothers who sit around and listen to this, who allow the Rory Lanceman or the people of the world to come to the community and make statements and not challenge them. I think our best public relations is for our family members who know who we are, who know what we do, and who know that we care about what we do to challenge these people when they get up and use correction officers as a scapegoat as to why Rikers need to be shut down or why the jails need to be shut down.
Thank you, Prez. What we'll do now is read a card and alternate with the microphone for those who are a little shy and bashful and didn't want to approach the mic. The question here, and for any panelists who would like to answer it, what do you say to employees who want to know why should I pay dues or join a union?
That's a no-brainer. That's a no-brainer. Look around the society. Look around the middle class. Look around how we survived this long. I mean, the benefits. I mean, right now, if anybody go to the pharmacy or go to the doctor, pay a visit, a lot of people's on medicine that's monthly occurring or reoccurring. If you go to the pharmacy right now and ask for a pill, for a diabetic pill or whatever the case may be, and ask the pharmacy how much it's going to cost without a union, they're going to tell you about $600 a pill. And that's on a regular basis. And nobody can afford that. So ask yourselves, if I have a union and I pay a $5 copay, that's a big difference in itself. Those are just one of the differences you have. The benefits that go along with paying dues. A lot of times the dues you pay, on an average of $25, $30, doesn't add up to the benefits that you receive. You'd be surprised, a little bit more you think you're paying, think it's a lot. To some people, it may be a lot. Some people are low-paid families. But the bottom line is that the dues that you pay doesn't compromise the amount of benefits you receive from the dues that you pay. Believe me, it's a manifest of everybody paying the dues, and it goes into one pot. So we can delegate the power to make sure that the benefits you get comes from a little bit of dues that you pay. So yes, the dues in itself is what it is. It's just like this. You pay taxes, right? We pay taxes to the government. For what? So the government also can provide us with needs and stuff in society. Same thing with dues. Dues to me equal taxes. The same thing.
Thank you, President. We'll take a question from the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alan Moran. I am a resident of Southeast Queens, a super proud member of Local 372, and a delegate of Mr. Francois' Union. I had 3 specific questions for some of the panelists and a generic question. But before I even get into that, first I just wanted to thank Ms. Spigner and the wonderful ladies of this organization for putting this together. The reason why I really want to thank Ms. Spigner is she's not just about the talk, she's about the walk. There's been situations that have happened in this community, and you know, I'm big on social media. I have my own little social media brand, and she's like, Alan, why don't you just come take a walk with me? Come take a walk. But before I get in there, you know, when we think about Dr. King and why he was murdered, what I think about is people think that he was murdered because he had a dream. He was really murdered because he took action. And before I even get into this, I just want to give a shout out to some of the brothers that are on this panel, especially my president. He is what they call a statistical anomaly. He is a brother that literally said, when he came in, that I'm going to be membership driven. And since first day, he has engaged all generations in our union and our millennial members. And I just want to say that I don't take that for granted. It's the reason why I'm super involved. So the 3 specific questions, the 3 specific questions that I had were for Elias, Ms. Hines, and Amir. But the generic question that I had was, how are you all developing millennial members to carry on their legacy? Because I think all too often when we look at communities of color, we have people who like to stay in positions and don't want to move forward. And literally, we see our communities have plateaued. So the specific question that I had for Mr. Elias, and I really have to appreciate you, brother, because I saw you on the news talking about, I think the Kennedy Foundation did something when they were releasing people on bail, and you asked a question, you said something that really triggered me. You said, the Kennedy Foundation is releasing people paying their bails randomly without looking at their cases. And you said, which neighborhoods are these people coming back to?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to ask those questions. You're talking about people who live in Connecticut, all these little rich communities, but they're paying bail for people who are a nuisance in our community, right? So I just wanted to ask you specifically, you know, how do we rectify that? For Amir, I wanted to ask you, how do you bridge the gap between millennial membership and senior membership, right? If we're going to move anywhere, ladies and gentlemen, there has to be some sort of intergenerational collaboration, right? And I forgot to mention, I'm a member, I work for DOE, I work for a superintendent, but I'm also the founder of the first Black and Latino employee resource group in the DOE. We have over 800 members. And literally I started this in the DOE because, you know, we go to these city agencies and they keep talking about how we want to see people of color move up, but they don't have the proof. Why is it that there's so many discrepancies when it comes to hiring and pay when it comes to people of color? So my question to Ms. Hines is, I'm doing a lot of work with the Equity and Excellence Initiatives, and when I see these young brothers right here, and I think about their experiences, my experiences personally as a student, And this is, you know, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I feel like this is an important question. When we talk about our young black men, and we talk about the UFT, and we talk about their role in molding our young minds, you know, when Eric Gardner was murdered, and when Al Sharpton and a couple of unions decided that they were going to march in Staten Island, there were a couple of teachers in the UFT that were upset and said that the union, the UFT, should not be marching for Black lives. So my question to you is, you know, how do you navigate a space where the UFT says they don't want to sign on to the Black Lives Matter movement?
I really, really appreciate that question because I think there is a lot of miscommunication about what members of the UFT stand for and believe in. As one of the people who is in the leadership of the organization, it's been really important for me to advocate not only for our students of color, not only for our young black men and young black women, but also educators of color, right? We passed a resolution in December of 2018. Our delegate assembly passed a resolution stating that we are going to continue the work that we've always done in communities with need. And we would continue that work in partnership with organizations like Black Lives Matter, like Hispanic Federation, like women's organizations that we work with. There were those who wanted to use the Black Lives Matter week as a way to pull members of the UFT apart from each other. And they got some traction around those issues. But we have been taking the opportunity not only to do the work in our communities and doing the work in our schools and working on issues of implicit bias and working on issues of true community connection with our students and with their parents and their communities, but we've also been continuing those partnerships that are really, really important to this equity and excellence work. So I would invite you all to see that resolution that we passed in December of 2018 that speaks to that work so that there is clarity about where the UFT stands, specifically on Black Lives Matter, but more generally on the ways in which we're working with communities of color.
I'm sorry. To answer your generic question as far as millennials are concerned, I'm still trying to put my finger on them, so maybe I'll get with Amir and he can help me out a little bit. It's hard to pin down millennials in a lot of different areas. For whatever reason, their experiences and their background, they're our kids. They're our kids. The millennials are our kids. I'm 58 years old. My youngest is 34. And my oldest, I think she's 36. At the end of the day, their experiences, not my experiences. And I did everything I possibly could to ensure that they did not have my experiences. So their reaction and how they respond to certain things is a lot different. Even in my new members that are millennials, the way those of us who came on this job, you know, with a GED or a high school diploma, viewed and looked at things is a lot different than they do. I mean, real quick, my daughter with my granddaughter, you know, when she does something my daughter doesn't like, it's a conversation. When my daughter did something I didn't like, I might have popped her. So it's just so different in dealing with them. The other question, look, African Americans, Latino, we can't have it both ways. We can't have it both ways. With this Kennedy Foundation and things of that nature, the bails, we got to understand that this is a business. And what they're doing as far as bail reform and all this stuff is business. This stuff is dollars and cents, whether you want to believe it or agree or not. It's about dollars and cents. In the state of New York, where they used to have 70, 75,000 inmates. They now have less than 47,000. In New York City and Rikers Island and New York City jails, we have less than 7,800 inmates, and the numbers are dropping. We, like someone said earlier, we have to make up our mind. We want them to come back to the community better than when they left. So we can't say we don't want to spend any money inside the jails and helping them and educating them and making sure that they're better when they come out. To answer your question, I'm sorry, I'm just skeptical of the Kennedy Foundation and any of these people who are running around and only want to focus on the jail. I'll say this and I'll stop. In the Criminal Justice Bureau, corrections is the last stop on the train. So why are we focusing so heavy on the last stop as opposed to the first stop? The thing that's going to stop them from getting to the last stop. So I'm skeptical of the Kennedy Foundation and anyone else who's just so heavily involved with the last stop.
Let me, Al, he wasn't here earlier. Maybe you missed my whole talk about millennials and young people. So I'm going to say it for you again. And your local and my local, we have a next wave committee, okay, one of the most viable left, that we bring young people in. Okay, when we go on conferences, I just left a conference in Washington where I had a number of young people at that conference. And when we go away to places, we take young people with us. The mix is, there's two things has to happen. One, we can't be afraid of young people, and young people can't take over tomorrow. Okay? So it has to be a mix. It's not one way. Okay, you can't come in and, okay, we're going to change everything now, we're going to take over in the world, because then people get resentful. So it has to be that mix. Okay, also, if I don't recognize my vice president of political action, I cannot go back to work. So Michelle Chompong is in the room. She is my boss. and my associate administrator of welfare fund is over here too, and 2 members. But my point to you is that, now on the other issue, we grapple with social issues too, like Elias said. So he's skeptical of the Kennedy Foundation. He is. But is there a need for bail reform? Yes, it is. Bail should not be based on your affordability or the judge's view of you being a threat. Okay, everybody who listen, there are some people in jail who belong there, but everybody in jail don't belong there. They need to have access to a fair system. So this is not an easy answer. He should be right. Skeptical of people who want to put money into stuff, yes. But also at the same time, is it a real issue? It is. Okay? We're not going to talk about the president and his criminal justice reform on a federal level, and he getting all that kind of credit he want to get for that nonsense. The criminal justice system has always been what Malcolm X said, just us. Brown people and people of color, period. So but let's not throw out the baby in the bathwater. Let's look at the issues. And unions are going to have to do this more and more. And the millennial, the young people, you guys have the energy. You have the ideas. I'm with him. I don't know how to talk to a 28-year-old for real. I mean, I can talk to him, but I don't know. I want to be able to talk and listen to. So who can do that better than you? And that's what it is. And we just cannot be afraid. And in these organizations, some of my brothers in NAACP, CBTU, we got to let the young people in and be a part of it and be serious about hearing them and trying some things that they say, let's try. And it doesn't make you less valuable. Matter of fact, you become more valuable when you do that. So don't run away from an organization. If you're young, people get frustrated. Keep on banging. Because one thing's going to happen. One day, we ain't going to be there. And you're going to have to be there to keep it going.
Thank you. Thank you, President Wells. We actually have, I know time goes by very quickly when you're having fun, but we have about 7 minutes left. And 7 minutes with 5 cards and 3. We could do it? Okay, 30-second responses. But this one question right here, it says, with the building of the downtown Jamaica area, have the local unions been positively or negatively impacted? I guess Amir's shaking his head, so he has a quick 30-second response.
There is none of the buildings going up that is being done union. That's it. None of the big buildings you see in downtown Jamaica are union.
Wow.
And they're 40 years too late in the first daggone place.
And to add on to that real quick, we have concerns about the Amazon being built in Long Island City, so we need to watch out for that as well, because we need to come in unionized, otherwise don't come at all.
Great point, President Francois.
My question is actually for Jamala. I'm a student at St. John's University studying adolescent education with a concentration in social studies, and I begin student teaching tomorrow.
Yeah. Woo! All right.
So my question for you is, you mentioned how your school incorporates and teaches your students how to get involved in careers that do have unions. But in my case, it'll be my classroom, but it's not my classroom. So how do I go about doing so when I have time, my supervisor, my cooperating teacher, all in Common Core, all kind of pressuring against me? How do I incorporate that in my class?
So these are going to be the biggest challenges, especially as a student teacher, right? Because you're on the ground trying to absorb as much as you can from your colleagues about the profession of teaching and learning. I would suggest to you that you engage in conversations with your cooperating teacher. Share the information with them so that they're aware that these opportunities are out there. A lot of times people are grinding so much that they don't pay attention to the fact that these opportunities are available for our students. So in addition to just being a sponge and soaking up as much as you can from your colleagues, push your ideas out there so that you, as someone who's closer in age, probably a much stronger connection in terms of the community in which you live, can speak to the needs and concerns of your students in ways that established teachers may not be able to. And so you should be willing to push your ideas out there, make your recommendations and suggestions. And good luck to you.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Virtually known, which is IT. But my real question for you is around how are you managing your brand so that people in the public really recognize the value? That's the key. You started talking about a piece of it. How are you managing the brand so that young people, every aspect can look at as the benefit of that collective bargaining, business relationship, negotiation are meaningful?
I can talk for what CWA Local 1180 is doing. We have what we call borough committee meetings. The one in Queens, I'll get the address, but I know it's somewhere on Guy Brewer. So every month in every borough, there is a borough committee meeting. And the members that live in those boroughs are encouraging their neighbors and people that they know in that borough to come to those meetings. We also invite to the meeting politicians to address different issues. So we're trying to engage with the public that the unions, basically, we are also, even though we're in the union, we're still members of the community and we want things to happen. Many people should know a lot of things that gets done is through politics. So when we have these borough committee meetings, Donovan Richards, he comes. Gregory Meeks has been there. For the other boroughs, we have them coming. I know for Brooklyn, it's held at the Brooklyn DA's office, downtown Brooklyn. Those meetings are really fantastic because you learn a lot about the unions, but also you're able to put out your issues to the politicians that are right there that you probably voted them in. Understand, you have the power, and the power is that vote. When elections come, especially for your neighborhoods, you need to vote. Voting is one thing, but you have to make them accountable, okay? They come around when they're ready for votes and knocking at doors and saying they're doing, doing whatever. They get in, then you should be able to go to their office and say, we need A, we need B. But that's what we're doing for Local 1180, so we're out in the community so people know what the union is about.
Very quick question. This is for everyone that's on the panel. Good evening. My name is Vanessa Caesar. I'm a longtime member of this community. And my question to you all is very simply, similar to what you just said, but what type of community events, or not just your members, but what type of visibility do you have in the community? Like, is there an 1199 day? Is there a 372? Or we do this big event? You know, just can you guys explain what type of programs that you all have, or events that you have in the community, not just your members, can be a part of, can kind of know what you're doing, know the visibility that you have in our community, so that we can support you even though we're not members of your union?
Well, let me say this real quick. First of all, see what we got today? Today is Martin Luther King Day. We're here as a whole, developing the same thing you're asking about. Today is not member-driven. This is not union members here all the time. This is community members here. I think we mix primarily. We have union members here, and we have community members here. And this is what it's all about. Coming out today like this, Roger Spigner, the Weeks, brought us here today to engage in the community, to make sure that we bring the labor. I told you earlier today, bring that labor to neighbor. That's my pet peeve. Is bringing, it's a good question, is bringing the labor to neighbor, so you can understand what's going on in union society and community society. As a whole, it becomes justice in one.
So different unions do different. Like the UFT does community book drives all the time. My union is not as much in the community, but everything that we have, community is invited to. So we do a lot of heritage programs. Okay? We don't have anything personally like the UFT does. We don't do that. But we support organizations that are in the community. Okay, so that's how we do it. So we don't necessarily, but you know what? We're going to have to do it. And the sister said about Brandon, something has to change. But first, though, we got to strengthen our union. We got to get our members involved, because without them, there's no union. So we're going to do it, but hopefully through our members. But here's what we say in my union. If we improve the lives of our members, it improves the lives of their families. If it improves the lives of their families, it can improve the lives of their community. Our access to their communities is through our members. It has to be. So we want our members to tell you, you're not a member, but guess what? 371 is having John Lewis tomorrow night. Come down. UFT is doing a book drive. Sean for 372. And we have a family picnic up in the Bronx every year. First Sunday in August. It's always hot. And we don't have no ID. And we feed people from 12 to 5. Don't come at 5:05 talking about where the hot dogs is, but they're gone. So that's the kind of stuff we do. So we try to do it through our members, because any union has to have it actually engages members. But we're going to get better. Okay, and we on the social media hire somebody who does that tweeting and Instagram and all that stuff. They do all that stuff.
One thing real quick that I've been doing in the last 2 years that I've been president of the union is that we've been going into the community. Like for the school, we cut 1,000 here. We paid for 1,000 haircuts of neighborhood kids. All week we've been in the different homeless shelters providing food and helping out the family. This is something that we've been doing in the last 2 years. Actually, I've just created a new position in our union called the Community Liaison Officer, so that we can actually, so that the community can actually know that we're here. And this is something that we do, and I agree with Tony. You know, it's something that we have to do through our members. But the reality is, most of our members live here in the community, and you are the family. I guarantee you there's a correction officer somewhere in your family.
I just want to say thanks to everybody here. This has been very stimulating for me. I've been through all of these elements, Dr. King, Minister Farrakhan, a whole lot of this. I grew up, I was born before they were. But I'm gonna say that the saying, it takes a village to raise a child, we can't do it with just going to the polls and voting, with being educated as teachers, getting jobs as policemen, as engineers, as preachers, or whatever. We can't wait to vote 2 or 3 times a year. We have to be active in the communities where we live. And we can't be going to things where we have to pay for it, because everybody can't pay. But we've got to work together, because The best education comes when we're small. That's where we absorb things quickly and start to learn right from wrong. There is nothing more effective for our children than a great education and learning to know to do what you feel in your heart is right. Don't be fighting. Don't develop enemies. Don't have bullying. We have to work together to do this, people. We can't blame it on the police and say, well, they don't do what they should be doing, that the teachers are just sitting in the classrooms, not training our children. We have to work together. At schools, parents, they have to work to feed. They don't go to the PTA meetings. You have to work together. You have to designate somebody in the family to have responsibility and make it convenient for one and all. Thank you all very much.
Wow. And with that being said, I think that's the perfect way to end, with Mama giving us some instruction and some marching orders that we can move forward in 2019 and organize and organize and organize. Let's give a round of applause to our wonderful panelists. And again, we want to thank Rosalind Spigner, co-chair of Social Action Committee, as well as Mindy, co-chair, Social Action Committee, and all the wonderful, beautiful, intelligent sisters, my sisters of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Please stand up and get a round of applause. The best, the finest. It don't get any better. And I believe we have some brothers from Q Psi Phi out here too. So, oh, there we go. So again, panelists, thank you very much. And I believe we're going to take a group picture. But before the group picture, I'm going to bring our co-chair back to the microphone, our very own, our district leader, Rosalind Spigner.
He's so fabulous. So this is my soror, Denise Johnson White. She is the Regional Social Action Chair for our region and also a proud member of the Queens Alumni Chapter. And she just has a charge, because anything that we do, there is a charge component to it. So she's going to give you your charge, and then we'll take a group photo. And there's food downstairs. Eat it, pack it, take it, whatever. All right.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I want to say that my soror, Dr. Yvonne Crisville, basically gave us our charge. So this is very easy for me. Our charge to our community is to stay involved. We will stay involved when we vote. We will ask questions of our politicians. If you want my vote, what are you doing about the labor movement? We will get involved when our labor unions go to Albany and Washington, D.C. and do all of that. And we will also show up at these meetings to make sure that the concerns of our community is represented by the statements that are made in the unions. We will keep protesting when you create projects in our communities that don't involve unions and that we, people who look like us, are not represented. And we will work to ensure that all people who labor are respected. Right? Yes. All right. Thank you. Thank you all so very much for coming. I'd like to bring up our co-chair, Mindy Weeks, to close out our program.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd just like to say thank you to this marvelous panel. This is a force in the labor movement right now. I'm actually a vice president for Local 371, President Wells, where he's the president. And these are some of the big movers and shakers, so we thank you so much. Jacques, can't even say enough to you. Thank you every year for what you do, for always making time for us, your sisters, and doing it well. Okay, as Roz said, we want to take a group shot of everyone. Then we want y'all to go downstairs and get something to eat and then go home and get warm. Thank you, guys.
You forgot your little honorarium, so you will be getting them. Because we have class, but appreciation. If you want it in red, we'll give it to you in red. Okay. All right.
We
Thank
get the
you.
people behind it.
Yeah. So, members